Hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome to Samvada Dialogue for Impact by Indie Village Foundation. It's really nice to revive our dialogue series. We founded this in July 2019, back when not a lot of these events used to happen. And we were very consciously a physical space because we wanted two very clear outcomes from this engagement. One was for development sector practitioners, thinkers, academicians, people who wear various hats to come together and have an exchange of knowledge and resources. And the other was for us to have FaceTime so that more and more partnerships and collaborations could come out of this, right? We didn't know we were going to, right, through a pandemic, we were going to pause, rethink. So we did rethink a lot about whether we wanted to contribute to the traffic in the webinar space already, and is that what we wanted to do? But what our realization from that was we wanted to continue to be a space that brings different people together, that brings all the lovely people that we've encountered through our networks, our personal networks, and the work that we do, and see where these synergies can be capitalized on, and continue to grow as an organization with the right kind of guidance from other people in the industry, like we have our speakers today. So thank you everyone for joining us. By now we are all aware of Zoom etiquette. Do keep your mics on mute, but continue to keep your fingers very active so you can engage with us on the chat box. The moderator and the speakers will take your questions at some point, maybe in the discussion or towards the end. We'll be taking some questions offline if we cannot accommodate that during the discussion. I want to thank our speakers for making time to come today. This is a really pertinent topic. And one of the reasons Samvada was revived is, as a rural development organization, Indie Village Foundation wants to enable more discussion between rural sector organizations as well, which can be a very lonely journey. And henceforth, our topics will be more around thematic areas, which are core focuses of our organization. And we will have people like you share your perspective, your experiences, so that we can learn from you and we can figure out where we fit in the development space without reinventing the wheel, as we all like to say. So thank you again for all panelists to make time. Akansha, over to you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Shreya. I am Akansha Sharma and I lead the gender vertical at Indie Village Foundation. It's an absolute honor to be moderating this brilliant panel of seasoned practitioners who feel so strongly about the people they work with. A little about the gender vertical at Indie Village Foundation. At Indie Village, we recognize the need for special incentives and measures to bring women and other genders on an equal footing. We actively work on bringing in and retaining more women into the formal workforce by providing first-generation income earner women with professional mentorship. We also organize gender reflection circles where we try to create safe space for working women by encouraging them to reflect on the interplay of gender dynamics in their everyday lives. At the gender vertical, we don't just design gender-sensitive and inclusive social impact interventions, but also as thought leaders strongly advocate for gender equality and empowerment. Our event today promises to be a lively discussion where we will learn and unlearn how we conceptualize and think about gender equality and empowerment. We encourage you to type your questions, like Shreya said, in the chat box, and we will take them towards the end of the panel discussion. So please do communicate with us through this way about the topic. Today, we are discussing the government's proposed bill to increase the age of marriage for girls from 18 to 21. A task force headed by Jaya Jetli was set up by the Ministry of Women and Child Development to examine matters of motherhood, maternal mortality rate, and improvement of nutrition. The task force recommended that a change in the minimum age of marriage would help empower women and lead to gender equality. But the question here is, are we just looking at the tip of the iceberg? And that's what we will be addressing today. And at this point, I would like to introduce our speakers to you. We have Divya Mukund, Senior Officer for Asia from Girls Not Brides, She has 18 years of experience of working at the local, national, and international level with grassroots groups and international organizations. She has worked and led large-scale projects on the themes of livelihoods and gender, child rights, and youth development. Partnership strengthening and coalition building is her strong suit. She has a master's in development studies from the London School of Economics. We have Rama Shyam, Director, Adolescent and Youth Program from Society, Nutrition and Health Action, SNEHA. She is an ethnographer by training and has over 20 years of experience in both grassroots and international organizations. Rama regularly contributes to advocating integrated adolescent programming based on a gender transformative approach across national and global platforms. We have Chandana Bhattacharya, who's the founder of Ekakanya, a demographer by profession. Dr. Chandana has worked extensively in the field of research and development. She has worked as a project manager in International Center for Research on Women between 2003 and 2005, and works collaboratively with the grassroots level partner to implement simple and sustainable monitoring and evaluation approaches for adolescent reproductive and sexual health projects. We have Tanvi Jha, who is a state coordinator from International Center for Research on Women. She has over 17 years of experience on child rights issues and has strong research and writing experience, has been part of several interventions focused on child rights in Jharkhand. She has previously worked as state coordinator for International Labour Organization and was placed at Jharkhand State Labour Department. She played the lead role in drafting the state action plan for elimination of child labor. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are deeply grateful for your presence. I would just like to start off with giving a little context and background to our audience today. So the proposal to change the age of marriage has met with three distinct responses. The move has been hailed by one group as a landmark decision. This group strongly believes that equality comes from equal laws and objective equality is the need of the hour. They feel that no law can justify the difference in the age of marriage between men and women. The other group is vehemently opposed to the idea of changing the age of marriage, as they feel that a law on its own can't and won't bring about gender equality and empowerment. The law might end up being coercive and affect the most marginalized by criminalizing them. The third group feels that a holistic systemic approach is the prerequisite to attaining gender equality and empowerment, but they strongly feel that this approach needs to be supplemented by equal laws. Currently, the bill is with the parliamentary committee and the final report is awaited by March end. Divya, I would like to start with you. In our conversation, you walked us through the series of events and discussions that took place across some civil society organizations and activists in the immediate aftermath of this announcement. Would you like to share the series and the timeline of events that happened post the announcement of this proposal?
Sure. Thank you so much, Akanksha and Indie Village Foundation for inviting me here. And just wanted to add that I'm also here representing the Young Voices National Movement, which is a group of 96 civil society organizations that had worked together to facilitate young people's responses to this proposed amendment when it first came out in 2020 and to submit recommendations to the task force. So just to share a very brief chronology of, the kind of, over the last 2 years, what's been happening is that, as we all know, as you shared, Akanksha, that in 2020, this task force was set up. And, it also happened to coincide with the time when the first lockdown had come into place. So physical movement was very restricted. Physical meetings were not possible. And, this was really like, it came out in the papers. And at the time, there was a group of about 60 civil society organizations that came together via a Zoom call to say that, look, the government has sort of proposed this. It almost seems as if it's going to happen. There's where is the space for discussion and deliberation? And how can we sort of put in our experiences from the ground, by which we believe that such a law will not only, one, as you mentioned, not really make a great difference in the lives of girls from the poorest communities living in rural areas of India who are the most impacted by child early and forced marriage, but also that it will actually work to harm them in terms of impacting their right to choice and exercising their sexuality. Because as we all know already, the law is actually ending up criminalizing young people when they are choosing partners rather than, when their parents are arranging marriages, then the law doesn't really come into action. So as a result, this group of 60 CSOs very quickly put together a manifesto, which was also submitted to the task force. And in that very meeting, there was a whole discussion around the fact that this law is actually going to impact young people of our country. And what is it that young people are saying? The government is saying we are doing this for girls, it's for gender equality. But what is it that young people feel about this? And as a result, over a period of 2 months, very quickly, we worked together to, and as I said, these 96 civil society organizations from 15 states of India came together. We don't have any kind of formal registration, but it's a group of organizations that came together and facilitated responses of 2,500 young people in the age group of 15 to 25 years. And we put together a report, which we submitted to Jaya Jetli ji. It's called the Young Voices National Report, and I can share the link in the chat box. And we also supported 4 girl representatives from North, South, East, West India to actually depose before the task force to share why such a move would actually be counterproductive to their agency. Post that, for the longest period, and after that in August, the Prime Minister announced that, this move is going to happen. Even before, there was no report, there were no recommendations, nobody could really make out what had happened. And till date, we don't have access to the report of that committee. And then again, there was like a long period of limbo. And then in the last winter session of Parliament, again, it was announced the cabinet has approved this amendment. And at the time, actually, there was a lot of hue and cry. The Young Voices National Movement, as well as a lot of civil society organizations, did raise their voice against this. There was a lot of media coverage. And post that, now the government has sort of set up a parliamentary committee to again look at and to review this proposed amendment. Of course, again, there were very little, there was just a very small sort of space where we got to know through one newspaper in Kannada, actually, that, there was a certain time period, a 2-week time period in the end of January this year, to submit recommendations from stakeholders to the government, to this task force, to this parliamentary committee in Hindi and English. So again, as a Young Voices National Movement, we made a submission stating why we oppose this move, along with all the relevant documents, including a letter from girl citizens of the country to the chairperson, Mr. Vinay P. Sahasrabuddhe, and other MPs, stating why such a move is actually very sort of facile. It doesn't really make any real difference in their lives, and how they actually placed forward alternatives as to what will be needed to make them delay their age of marriage. And those are really very real options in terms of access to quality, safe education, access to healthcare facilities, access to safe and decent employment close to their homes. So they were also very clear in terms of these are the things we require if you really want us to delay our age of marriage. Changing the law will either make no difference, or it will harm us more than it will help us. So that, in very short, Akansha, is what's been happening. And we still don't have access to that, to the report from the task force. And we have asked for a meeting with, this parliamentary standing committee, but have still not received any response from them. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Divya. I mean, a lot of us, we were not privy to behind the scenes conversations that have been happening, especially in light of the fact that the report is also not public. So thank you so much for sharing that. I would now like to turn to Rama. Rama, at Sneha, you work with some of the most marginalized communities and women. In our conversation before, you spoke about structural changes that need to be undertaken if we want to better women's health and nutrition in the interest of gender empowerment. Can you please elaborate further on the structural changes Sneha works on?
Yes, thank you, Akansha. And I think Divya has covered excellent ground to give us the context of how the discussions took place and how there has been complete silence in terms of engaging with young people, engaging with the most important stakeholders regarding this proposed legislation. Now, as you opened it up for me, I would like to bring in just 3 to 4 statistical aspects here, which might help us understand the irrelevance of this proposed legislation. If we look at it, the Prevention of Child Marriage Act, the legislation came into being 40 years ago. Even after 40 years, we have not been able to eradicate child marriage from this country. In fact, if we look at the National Family Health Survey 5 data, we see that we still have around 25% of young women or young girls who are married before the age of 18. Now, the second statistics that I would like to put forth before all of you is that definitely we have been able to make a dent in child marriage. And we have been able to really stop child marriages, and the average age at marriage has increased. Again, according to NFH's data, it has increased to 22 years. However, there are 2 arguments that are being cited at this point. One argument is that raising the age at marriage to 21 will positively impact maternal mortality or levels of anemia. There is absolutely no evidence to suggest this. In fact, quite the contrary. As I said, we as a country have been able to raise the age at marriage to 22. However, if you look at anemia data just for adolescents, which is in the age group of 15 and 19, mark this, we are saying that age at marriage has increased according to data to 22. But in the age group of 15 to 19, we see that proportions of anemic girls have increased by over 10% between the 2 NFHS data sets, NFHS 4 and National Family Health Survey 5. It has increased from 47% to 58%. So definitely, this has got nothing to do with levels of anemia. At the same time, another data set tells us that the safest age at pregnancy, again, please note the safest age at pregnancy to positively impact maternal mortality or to reduce maternal mortality is between the ages of 20 and 24. So basically, we are taking away the safest age at pregnancy from young women if we were to legislate in this manner to raise the age to 21. In addition, just to reiterate what Divya was saying, the Law Commission in 2018, in the interest of equality, if we were to talk just about equality, in 2018, the Law Commission actually suggested that the age at marriage for boys be brought down to 18 from 21 in the interest of equality. And this whole argument of girls maturing before boys, etc., is an outdated argument. So we need to look at everything in the context. So in fact, I'm quite confused as to why the government has not even considered the arguments posited by the Law Commission in 2018 in the interest of equality. So it seems really vacuous, to propose a legislation of this sort without actually backing it up by evidence or even getting into arguments concomitant with what they're positing in terms of maternal mortality, levels of anemia, etc. And as Divya cited, I think very true, why we have been able to make a dent in child marriage is because of education, because of skilling, and we need more of those. No legislation will help unless we work collectively towards structural changes or creating more opportunities for young girls to become independent in the true sense.
Thank you, Rama. Thank you for sharing those insights. And your statistics, I think they do give us, these on-ground realities do, I mean, they are completely blindsided by certain statistics sometimes, and it's really nice that you brought them to the fore. Chandana, on that, in our conversation, you talked about how a holistic and integrated approach can go a long way in bringing about gender equality and empowerment, but equality also has to reflect in institutions which also reflect equality in laws and legislation. Will you talk to us about your organization's interventions and your stance on the overall, legislation? Sorry, you're on mute.
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you, Akanksha. So I think I will start with, as you said, I'm coming from the grassroots level organization, and I will introduce our organization, which is called Eka Kanya. At Eka Kanya, we are giving the girls the platform to achieve their full potential and to become change leaders, to create positive change, not only in them, but also in their community. And Eka Kanya, we focus our intervention program, focus in rural areas of Rajasthan, very remote villages. And this topic is very apt for all over India, but Rajasthan, I think, stands as one of the very important states when it comes to status of women and girl child, because of still backward status in India when it comes to all the major states. So this is a very apt topic for this state, and our work completely focus on the rural areas of Rajasthan. In Eka Kanya, what we have is that we call our program Parinati, which means change. We take a cohort of 17 to 22, a cohort of 30 girls in age group 17 to 22 years. And we, over a period of 2.5 years, we train them to be change leaders. And this is a very intensive program where we are giving them a vision, a skill to develop their vision, skills to develop critical thinking, their self-awareness, self-esteem, opportunities of learning skills like computers, tailoring, and also supporting higher education. We are teaching them the art to negotiate with their parents about their futures and about their education. We provide scholarships, and we do this with the help of 5 modules. It is called Parinati model, and the modules are on leadership and change leaders. There are modules on women laws, Panchayati Raj institutions, computers, self-help groups, government policies, and of course, Pehchan. So we have, it's a journey that we have started from 2016, and we are into our 3rd batch. As I said, each batch is just a group of 30 girls, and our first batch was from 2016 to 19. Then we implemented another batch in another village, and recently, means last week, we launched our 3rd batch. So now coming to this take on, Akanksha, you have also discussed with me on this today's Samvada and the debate is about the age at marriage. I would say, yes, it is a step towards gender equality and empowerment. But yes, I do agree that any such law just passing in paper would not help in isolation. What we lack in our country is that the integrated intervention strategy, which may still be in papers, but not seen vehemently in the implementation areas, that is at the grassroots. And that's how we have this slow pace of development when it comes to the statistical achievement about age at marriage, age at pregnancy, and women's health, maternal morbidity. And why I'm saying that increase in age at marriage would yield, but with an integrated approach. One is at the government policy level, where all the civil societies, NGOs, government, medias come together. The other is at the NGO level. So here I'm going to talk about our program and how, we have been able to, in this cohort, now we have 90 girls in 3 batches. And what we have seen over the 6 years, few girls are now almost involved with us for the past 6 years. So when we, why in the rural, I'm just talking, Akansha, in the context of the rural environment. Why are parents, absolutely their focus is to marry their daughters early. It's a known fact. It's not that something new I will talk about, but just I'm reiterating, it's fear about the safety of the girls, maintaining their chastity, losing family honor, like their fear of getting into relationship or eloping. They don't see any benefit in investing in girls. The girls, they see that they will contribute in marital household. The money which is, they would like to rather save their money and invest in their wedding for dowry rather than spend even, they are, it's not that its poverty is any way, becoming a hindrance. They have enough money. Many households, they can spend 25 lakhs in their money in their wedding, but you ask them to invest 2,500 for education, they will not do. Of course, things like distance of colleges and universities, lack of transportation, accessibility, all these factors, aid in the rural areas. When it comes to practicality and to see the reality, why the parents are supporting, early marriage. We have the parental and elderly group. The other is our young girls. The quality of education in the village, though we say that it has been a social development is slow. It's a mindset, behavioral development. It's a slow process. Earlier, it was attaining primary education, middle level education. Now in the villages, high school, getting up to the level of, say, senior secondary school and even colleges is not a problem. But it's a question of good quality education. Getting enrollment in college is, they are getting enrolled, if not all, but there is no way that they are going to the college. They're just going, it's just a ritual. They are giving, they're just going at the end of the year to give exam by studying some guidebook. So the quality of education is absolutely very, very poor. So that inculcates lack of confidence, lack of clarity. So we have that cohort, that very productive age group of girls. We have confused girls who have no confidence, who have lack of aspirations. At the same time, they have exposure to media. So they are also not able to communicate their desire to their parents, and because of lack of quality, clarity and confusion. So through this, sorry if I'm taking but two more minutes. So through this program, what we have seen is in 2.5 years, in last 6 years, our first batch girls, we could see very good development in the sense that our girls have confidence, our girls have aspirations, our girls have learned to develop their goals. They are behaving like change leaders. They have learned to communicate. Few girls could convince their parents for not getting married early. We have a few girls who are already 23, 24 and not married, and they are aspiring for higher education. We have given them admission at in the cities, in the universities. They are going that. So it involves, what I'm trying to say, it's a very complex thing. It's an integrated approach that we have to take care in our stance. And at the end, I would say that, we have few success stories. So from we have seen that one of our girls now is also working. There are actually quite a few working, got job. And one girl could save her family from loan, and she has given from her salary. In last 5 months, she could give 50,000 rupees. So that has given tremendous confidence to her family, and also to the community. So everyone is talking about, oh, your chori is like supporting, abhi to chori job kar rahi hai, and all. So I think we need to create role models. The role models give, in our society, we need role models, so that the gendered expectations of the parents shift to the empowered expectations. And we have seen that in our intensive approach. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Chandana. I think in our conversation, you also mentioned that when you spoke to a lot of young girls, 18, 19, and 20-year-old girls, and they said that they also wanted to marry later. But it could have been better had the law also been in place, that they could have said, okay, we want to marry later, and the law also agrees with us. So I think, thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your intervention with us. We hope that other organizations take this up and also have more holistic social impact interventions when it comes to gender. Moving on to Tanvi. Tanvi, a lot of people have said that the move to increase the law has been paternalistic, and one major argument against the proposal is that some girls from specially conservative, regressive, and patriarchal families escape their family's clutches by choosing to marry a person of their choice after turning 18 years old. I saw in International Center for Research for Women's report on agency and aspiration of adolescent girls on marriage, evidence from Jharkhand, India, that a considerable number of girls tilted towards the age of marriage at 18. Would you also like to share your findings from the ground? What have your conversations been like with young women? What have they said? I think one of the participants also left a message on the chat group asking if there were some on-ground experiences and on-ground conversations that can be brought up. So over to you, Tanvi.
Thank you, Akansha. So ICRW's work is largely evidence-based, and like we started this intervention with adolescent girls, where we first spoke with the girls on why they are dropping out of school and whether it is leading to child marriages. And it was very interesting that the data showed that out of school was a major reason for girls to be either to get proposal for marriages or to get married. We found that girls who were out of school were 3.4 times more likely to be married, and dropout had preceded marriage for 59% of the girls. And though almost all the girls were enrolled in schools initially, but 44% of the girls, they had dropped out after middle school. And like Chandana also just said, the quality of education is something that is very important. I would like to just share a small story. I was in the field in December, and we were in this middle school where ICRW is implementing a curriculum which aims at bringing gender-enabled environment in schools. So there was this class where girls from class 8 were sitting, and we told them that let us write what are the key messages from this session today. And so we just said those messages in the class, and the girls were just looking at us. So I asked one of them that, why aren't you writing? So she said that, I don't know how to write. So this was so surprising. And then she said that if you write it on the blackboard, only then we will be able to copy it. So without understanding, they were writing, and they seemed to be very resigned to their fate. The teacher also came up to us and said that please don't bother them much, because they are ready to, drop out. And for 2 of them, the marriage has also been fixed. So this is the state. And not only ICRW's data, if you look at the data of UNFPA, it says that 51% of young women with no education, they had got married below 18. And what we also found during the pandemic, we conducted several situation assessments, and girls, they themselves said that during this pandemic, we have had returnee migrants who were outside. Now they have come back to the house. So our household work has increased. There is no school, and we can't go out, and a lot of violence was also reported around that time. So one can also imagine the mental health situation. But besides that, something more interesting that came out was that, as per the government advisory, marriages did not have to be big ceremonies. So that was also a push factor. Many parents, they thought that this is the right time. We will not have to invite a lot of people. And many marriages happened around that time. So the pandemic has definitely further aggravated this problem. And I don't think that raising the age will be able to address any of these cause of concerns. And what ICRW does in such situations is that we intervene through an ecological model where we keep the adolescent girl at the center, and we work with the family, with the community, and with all the key stakeholders and systems. So what we found was that most of the girls, when they went through this process, because earlier also ICRW has implemented the gender equity movement in schools, the Planet program, and it was found that the agency and self-esteem of the girls was very positively impacted by these programs. And it was found that the girls were able to make decisions for their career, and their confidence also improved. They were able to negotiate with their parents on when they wanted to get married. So what ICRW advocates on this issue is that it's not the law, but one is that we have to see whether it is getting enforced or not, and whether these issues of quality education, employability of girls, they are taken into recognition. Also, there is another issue that RT, which focuses on universalization of education till the age of 14 years. So why not extend it up to 18 years for girls, so that most of the girls at least get that minimum level of education, and they are not forced to drop out when they reach the middle school. And one more thing that is very important is all the incentives that are being given by the government on girls' education, like, for example, the Kanya Dan scheme or the Sukanya Yojana scheme. So they are again very gendered, and the ultimate aim of all these schemes is that the marriage happens at the age of 18. So these schemes are in a way reinforcing this notion that girls are a burden, and through these schemes, government is also sharing those burdens. So this is all from my side.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Tanvi. Thank you for sharing your findings. If anyone wants to read this report, I think they can head over to ICRW's website also, right? The report on agency and aspirations.
Yeah, it's there on our website.
Yeah.
I can also share the link.
Right. I think very interesting point, Tanvi, you brought up. On that, if equality does become the need of the hour, and this is an open question, anybody who wants to take this up can take this up. This is for speakers. If equality, if there is, there are people who are saying that we should look at structural changes, but we should also look at laws. I mean, if you work on structural changes, work on education, work on bettering health indices, but if that is happening, it should also go along with the change in law. It needs to be supplemented by the change in law. If that idea is there, if equality is the need of the hour, then should the age of marriage become 18 for both men and women, as recommended by different international organizations and the Law Commission of India as well? or the age of marriage debate is actually not very relevant to the idea of gender empowerment and equality. And this is an open question. Anyone who wants to take this up can take this up.
I have very little, I'll say very little on this, but I think in the interest of equality, as I had mentioned earlier, 18 is the age at which all of us start voting. In fact, I have a very interesting story to share. I was at the UN General Assembly sitting with a few friends there many years ago. And in fact, one of my American friends quite critically told me, he said, in India, all of you have the right to vote at 18. But even at 18, you do not have the right to choose a partner. So for me, it is really a question of agency, and why this conversation on marriage right since childhood as a burdensome conversation with young girls, why not conversations on citizenships, citizenship rights, structural changes, etc. So my only submission is that age at marriage is therefore a redundant argument. There are many other ways, and I think Tanvi brought out a very interesting insight. Why not increase the age for universal education? Why just till 14? Why not till 18 or 21 for that matter? Why are we even talking about age and marriage, especially in a society which is riddled with issues of caste-based discrimination? We have this whole thing around love jihad now. We have the POCSO Act, which does not recognize consenting, young people consenting to physical relationships. At the same time, we do not even recognize the agency of young girls to either choose a partner outside the so-called social boundaries. So I think, therefore, legislation for this is pretty redundant.
Right. Thank you, Rama. Thank you for sharing that. The ecosystem also needs to be looked at as a whole, right? If you're talking about gender equality and empowerment, then there are other factors that also need to be considered. If you really want to have policy level interventions, then there should be policy level interventions like Tanvi said, universalizing education, looking at the POCSO Act. So I think that's a very, there are a lot of other policy interventions that can be looked into to reduce early child and forced marriages and to better health indices. So yeah, anybody else who wants to comment on the age of marriage contention, age of marriage versus the age of majority, or does everyone think that the debate?
Chandana had raised her hand and Divya also. Please go ahead. Yes.
While I agree with Tanvi and Rama, and I myself said that integrated approach is very important, I'd like to cite one important thing, that while we are working in the rural areas, see, we have to go step by step. Somewhere I have realized that after so many years of passing the legislation of 18 years as a legal age at marriage, now if you ask the parents in the rural areas, they are saying they know, but they are still still there, you can say, violation. So in a way, the law may also, let's not forget, it will create an impact into the parents' mind, into the elderly's mind, who basically take a decision. And whether the girls are, this whole aspect of girls' ability to select their partner or take a call at the age of 18, we at the rural setup, we are still far behind. So step by step it will happen. The only increasing age at marriage would only, the law would give our girls in the rural areas little respite, that the parents may come under pressure and don't, go for just looking for a groom and starting to look from the age of 16 or 17. They would say, okay, 21. But provided it is implemented in a better way with a lot of other approaches which we have discussed.
Divya, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, just thank you, Akanksha. I think if we just look at it from a very sort of basic principle of do no harm, right? So for a large number of young people, it may actually make no difference because in any case, they were maybe not getting married before 21. But for a vast majority of young people, what they also shared, and these are some of the insights that we got when we were doing this process of data collection from young people. They said in our lives, really, the law is like, it's like a railway track. The law is on one track and our life is on another. And the two never meet unless and until we contravene, the barriers of caste or religion. And then, really the power is in the hands of our parents, of the police, of the caste panchayats. And, if the power is never in our hands to use the law to actually be able to exercise choice. So this, in a sense, is another way. If you look at POCSO, actually, and POCSO, has, unlike PCMA, which has a much, it's still about, 2 years of jail. That's still not less. But POCSO is actually looking at a 20-year jail sentence, which means, your life is like over for a young boy getting into jail and maybe at, 19 or 20, and you're in jail for 20 years. And what's happening is more and more where it's a case of consenting adolescent or young people's choices, but parents or the community is not agreeing to these unions. POCSO is being slapped on young boys. And I feel there is not enough conversation on this in terms of what's happening to these boys. Girls may not be going to jails, but they're also going to shelter homes. And that also is not, a very sort of, you can enter a shelter home quite easily, but getting out of that shelter home and being able to make your own decisions whilst in that shelter home is another matter altogether. So, it may seem, I understand Dr. Chandana saying that it could help towards a mindset change. But really the whole other thing, what is it that young people are saying? Young people are saying we can vote, we can get a bank account, we can buy property, we can drive. All of these things are there at 18. Why don't you believe in us and give us the right to make our own choice for our own partner? And, even in that, will it mean now that if you change this, because in our country, premarital sex is really sort of a big taboo. So are you then going to say that we'll also raise the age of consent from 18 to 21? Because in the kind of communities we come from, it's not acceptable to have relationships with, other people outside the confines of marriage. So it's going to raise a whole gamut of restrictions for young people, for a large number of young people. And I think, while we all understand, that we would want to delay, we're not saying, 18 and you get married at 18 years and one day, right? What we are saying is ideally you delay the age of marriage. And young people are saying we actually want to decide if we even want to get married. Nobody's listening to us. If we want to get married, when we want to get married, how do we want to get married? You leave those decisions on us. But the problem is that you are not giving us this decision-making capacity from a very young age. And, Tanvi's point on the lack of quality in education, not just about, writing and numeracy skills, but the whole education around making your own decisions, making mistakes, learning from them, all of that is completely missing. And young people are acutely aware of this. They talk about it really clearly that, we want the kind of education which has life skills, which allows us to make decisions. We want to be able to have the skills to negotiate with our parents. The stories that we heard showed clearly that it was peer collectives of girls that were supporting individual girls at village level to actually effect some of these changes. So we need girls in rural communities really need those spaces, need those conversations, and need those opportunities. And they don't need a law which will end up criminalizing them and their partners. So I think that aspect of the law, it seems a little benign to say that 18, 21 and mindsets will change. I agree with Dr. Chanda. A lot of parents now, everybody, you go to any village in India, everybody knows it's 18 and 21 years. But are they really listening or are they really implementing it? Many young people also said that one very poignant quote from a young person was that, somehow my parents are keeping me in the house till the age of 18. If this law changes to 21, they may just not let me be born because they are not willing to bear my expenses till the age of 21 at a time when I am not bringing in any money into the family. I'm just about doing household chores. So I'm not seen as a productive or a valued member of my family. My parents are not going to be willing to bear this burden till 21 and give me the right to make that choice, and let me decide when, if, how, and whom I wish to get married to. Thank you.
Akansha, we can't hear you. You're on mute. Yes.
Sorry, am I audible now?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Divya. I think in a lot of reports, it also came out that, child marriage laws have always existed, but that has not helped in reducing the number of child marriages. And it is only when some interventions were made in education and related sectors is when the statistics actually came down from what it was. I think it was in 40s or something, and then it came down to around 27, and now it stands at 23 point something. So thank you for bringing that point. I am conscious that we're almost towards the end. We're running out of time. So at this point, I would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. Shreya, do we have questions? If you can.
We have some comments. Although Akansha, we started a little late, so I know that you have a couple of other questions, and I think that everyone's quite engaged looking at our participants. So if you would like to continue with the panelists for a couple of more, I think we can. And meanwhile, there are some really good comments and thoughts that are coming in. Thank you, panelists, for engaging with the audience on the side. Yes.
Sure. If that's okay with everyone. Another point that came out while I was having the conversation with Rama, that when Jaya Jetli committee was formed with the intention to, like I said, to look at MMR, which is maternal mortality rate, and IMR and women's nutrition. But when we are assessing gender empowerment and equality, and when we are looking, and when we are saying, okay, we want to better women's health, why are we always looking at why are we always reducing them to their reproductive capabilities? Why are we only thinking of women in relation to their reproductive capabilities? So in that light, if not maternal mortality rate and infant mortality rate, what are some of the indicators this panel would recommend to gauge gender empowerment in society? Is there a raised hand? Yeah, Divya.
So for me, and completely sort of subscribing to that viewpoint, absolutely, it's it's all become about little bit about seems to be about population control and control over women's bodies, and even that, as Rama very rightly pointed out, is not factually, the data doesn't support that. But other indicators, extremely important indicators, need to be around. We currently have one of the lowest participation of women in the formal workforce. It's something like, and it's been declining. So even educated women in urban areas are, choosing to sort of give up work. And again, in COVID, women are choosing to give up in favor of men, because men have also lost jobs, and the whole norm around, men should be the primary breadwinner, etc. And this is something that young people clearly said. They said it's not just education. We are looking for education to lead to safe and decent employment opportunities. So I think that is a very important indicator. And the other will definitely be around, the gender-based violence indicators, right from, at birth sex ratio to, actual instances of violence. We see horrific stories every single day in the newspaper. You don't even need to have all the data. It's so prevalent, and it's across urban, rural, wherever. The more horrific ones make it to national media, but it's happening every single day, every single minute. And I think those kind of data really need to be looked at much more carefully. And of course, there's, around access to digital media, access to bank accounts, all of those come. But for me, those are two which are like really sort of key ones that I would like to see talked more about. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm unable to raise my hand for some reason. So I'm just taking the liberty. Very briefly, I think we can definitely look at indices on agency by virtue of participation. Divya spoke about workforce and participation in civic participation, participation in community affairs, participation in public spaces. I mean, we are a country where we have, our parliament has not really thought about increasing the women's representation to 50%. What are we really talking about? There is such a big barrier against that, So I think these are topmost topics that need to be talked about. And as we have been saying repeatedly, anything to do with maternal mortality or levels of anemia, etc., will not be impacted positively by definitely not by raising the age to 21. And Akanksha, on your point on which we talked about, just yesterday, one of my colleagues said, what is celebrated is available. So motherhood is celebrated in the country. So you have national level indices or indicators around maternal mortality, around infant mortality. We do not have enough data that is being captured related to adolescent girls. Just look at the data for NFHS or all the National Family Health Survey. We do not have enough data on indices related to the age of adolescents. We need more of that. Someone has, Dr. Rishabh has talked about the Rashtriya Kishore Swasthya Karyakram. It's a beautiful program, very sound on paper, drafted in 2014. It has been 7 to 8 years now. It is largely unimplemented. So I think if we really want change, we will need to go back to the drawing board and talk about gender-informed policies.
Tanvi, anything that you want to share?
Yeah, there's just one critical indicator I think that I want to add here is this drop in school attendance after class 8. We need to really track how many girls are entering into high schools. If that indicator shows up, we are definitely on the right track, and that really needs to be tracked.
Doesn't the gross enrollment ratio kind of also factor in how many girls, moved from senior secondary to secondary or to high school?
Yeah, right. But besides enrollment, the attendance also is very important, and we really need to keep an eye on it because everybody is enrolled, but they are not attending school.
Right. Yeah. Chandana, any recommendations that you have?
I think just to add to what everybody said, I would say, indices on mobility, the mobility of the young girls, whether it is they are being mobile, going to the market to buy something, going to somebody's place, meeting friends, going to the nearby universities. So that brings a big attributes on empowerment. So that needs to be included.
Right. Okay, all right. I am fresh out of questions. I think all the panelists covered all the bases, and thank you so much. Okay, at this point, I would open the floor for questions. Shreya, if you can just, okay,
Yeah.
Chandana, your hand raised.
Yeah, no, like I said, the panelists have been very proactively responding to the questions in the audience. Right. But is there anyone who has a question and would like to unmute themselves and ask, perhaps, if only it's a question? If it's a comment or a thought, the chat box would suffice. Okay, great. We're always available to take questions afterwards. You can write to us. Shafi, you can put the presentation back on. Right. Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, those who joined us and stayed with us. And thank you, our panelists, for making time out to share your knowledge and practices with the rest of the community. We have recorded this video. We're going to share this on our YouTube channel as highlights, and hopefully also consolidate some of the keynotes that that came out of today's discussion, and we'll share it in one of our newsletters very soon. Right. So with that, we're going to end the dialogue event today. Thank you, everybody, again, and have a good evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.